2024 has been a really strong year for animation, especially for anime. Every season was filled with exciting new shows and returning fan favorites that for the most part met or exceeded expectations. While there certainly were more than a handful of series that let viewers down, there weren't nearly as many terrible ones in comparison to previous years. With that being said, in today's video, I'll be highlighting some of the worst series I've seen in 2024. Without further ado, let's get started. Alright, so first up is Adult Swim's adaptation of Junji Ito's Uzumaki. This was without a doubt the most disappointing anime of 2024. The series premiere was perfect. It's such a shame that the show went downhill after the first episode. Not only did they screw up the pacing in the subsequent episodes, but the animation quality went down the drain as well. I knew something was off in the second episode when I saw that janky running animation. Even worse than that was the PNG of Shuichi falling down in the fourth episode. Part of me thinks that the studio flew too close to the sun, trying to emulate the look of the manga. It was a bold attempt that could have paid off if they were able to keep the same level of quality of that initial episode. Uzumaki really had the potential to be one of the best animated horror shows ever created. It had an engrossing story with a strange mystery at the center of it, and some really tense scenes throughout the show. On top of that, the horror elements were just perfect. I've never read a Junji Ito manga, but I can tell this dude knows just how to freak out his audience. There's some truly unsettling imagery throughout this series. The body horror got so repulsive and unnerving. Man, some of this stuff was just hard to watch. The show also got weirder and weirder as it went on. Unfortunately, things started to get too goofy in the last half, with certain moments taking away the tension from a scene. Also, I'm not sure how the reception was for the ending of the show, but I personally wasn't a fan of how it concluded. It raises a lot of questions and not in a good way. Okay, so my instant death ability is overpowered. So this show was hands down the dumbest isekai of this year. It's about a guy who's summoned to another world with his classmates and has the ability to instantly kill people. The overall writing for the show was pretty bad. It had some pretty poor world building. I mean, the world is so nonsensical. And it was overstuffed with a lot of forgettable characters. Another issue with this show is how they censored the violence with these ugly black lines or shading. Sometimes it was used in other instances that just made no sense whatsoever. Ultimately, what I think saved this series from being completely terrible is its instances of self-awareness and humor that hits in unexpected ways. Next up is God's Game We Play. This was the No Game No Lifestyle anime centered around characters playing games. This show takes place in a world where people are selected to participate in a divine competition known as the God Games. Those chosen are referred to as the Apostles and are given a special power called an Arise to aid them during their matches. The series follows an acclaimed rookie apostle named Faye, who has spent the past year searching for the woman who taught him how to play games. After returning home, he's forced to tutor and monitor Leo Lashea, a former dragon god that incarnated as a human, to play with them. Together, they aim to clear the gods game by winning 10 matches against various deities and have their wishes granted. I was really looking forward to this one as a fan of Keizo Zane's other work, Our Last Crusade or Rise of a New World. Unfortunately, this one was pretty disappointing. It had some pretty unimpressive visuals, and the games they played were largely underwhelming. Not only that, but the pacing was pretty poor, and I think out of all of the Keizo Zane shows, this one had some of the worst writing. I still remember that card game episode. It was like watching a worse version of Yu-Gi-Oh! Overall, this series has a fine premise, but needed much more time. This should have been a two-part season, as 12 episodes wasn't really enough to get into the story and major conflict. Next up, we have Unnamed Memory. This anime revolves around a guy named Oscar, the prince of the Farce's kingdom, and Tinashe, a powerful witch who he seeks out to help rid him of a curse preventing him from having a child. Given that she wouldn't be affected by the curse's power, he suggests that they get married. While not enthusiastic about the future king's proposal, Tinashe agrees to stay at the castle for a year while she tries to figure out how to remove his affliction. This was a very flawed show, but it was refreshing to see a romance with adult characters, and the plot was interesting and unique. Unfortunately, the pacing was terrible due to the studio skipping a lot of the content from the light novel. Like there was this one episode where Oscar got attacked, and then the next episode they don't even bother to address it. They just moved on to the next storyline. Also, the relationship between Oscar and Tanasha was very rushed. Irregardless of its flaws, I did find the show pretty entertaining, and I actually liked the bittersweet ending, although many people said they hated it. Okay, so next up is Bye Bye Earth. This was a fantasy series set in a world dominated by anthropomorphic animals, where a human named Belle embarks on a journey to find out who she is in a place where she belongs. This show had a very unique and intriguing world, but the execution of the world building was a bit problematic. It had a lot of cool ideas and nice lore, but things often got pretty confusing. There's a bunch of different terms and concepts to keep up with, and much about the story you're supposed to piece together yourself. While I really appreciate this show for being a thinking man's anime, it failed to resonate with people because of its unusual storytelling approach. From what I've seen, many people online just couldn't fully grasp it. Even I got a bit confused toward the end. On a more positive note, the soundtrack by Kevin Penkin was very solid. It was really immersive and atmospheric. Animation-wise, it was pretty decent, although there were random bumps in quality during certain action scenes. I just wish the 2D animation was more consistent and that there was less CG used. I hate to have to put this one here because I kinda enjoyed watching it, but the next show we gotta talk about is Metallic Rouge. This anime was made to coincide with Bones' 25th anniversary and unfortunately was very underwhelming. The show followed an android named Rouge Red Star and her partner Naomi on a mission to track down a group of androids called the Immortal Nine. While I like the concept of the show and the futuristic setting, I think the main issue this had was just the writing. It was either confusing at times or in other instances, certain reveals were predictable. Aside from the writing though, I thought it had some good action scenes. The animation was pretty clean and I don't recall it dropping in quality. If nothing else, I gotta give this one props for being a 2D mecha show. The final show in this list is Tower of God Season 2. It really pains me to have to place this series on this list, given that I absolutely adored the first season. I once considered this anime to be among the best in its genre, but unfortunately that is no longer the case. The Answer Studio has failed to maintain the same level of quality that Telecom Animation Film achieved years ago with Season 1 despite retaining certain staff members. This season has been panned online for its poor pacing and inferior animation. One of my major gripes is the bland art direction compared to the previous season. The show just looks very bland and generic in comparison. Writing wise, I think it's fine, but not nearly as good as before. The story as a whole is still intriguing, but Bomb's new teammates are kinda dull and weak compared to his original team. Also, the series is starting to become a bit too overstuffed with characters, many of which are forgettable. It doesn't help that many of their names aren't easy to remember. Overall, I'd say the season dropped this series from being a masterpiece to just slightly above average. And those were just some of the worst shows I watched in 2024. What were some of the bad anime you've seen throughout the year? Let me know in the comment section below, and as always, thanks for watching.